Okay, so we saw that Locke had a view that is characterized as indirect realism. It's realism because he thinks we live in a real world. This is not a dream. We live in a real world with real material objects in it, real people in it. And he thinks that while we do not have direct acquaintance with that world, in other words, when we perceive things, we never perceive that external world directly on a view like Locke's, but we do it by means of intermediate representative images. That's why it's called indirect realism, that we perceive the world through images that represent the world to us. Now, he said that there's a difference between the world as it appears to us and the real world out there. What appears to us is a world having things in it that have primary and secondary qualities, primary and secondary properties. Again, you know, this can get tedious and even boring, but the point is, these little tedious distinctions, you know, led to Hume to question just about everything that we want to believe is true. And so, even though they may seem like insignificant, picayune little distinctions, they had a profound effect, and even to this day do on a lot of people's thinking. So here's Locke, and he says, look, the secondary properties, colors, tastes, smells, sounds, things that we can discern in an object with only one sense, those, he says, are subjective and in us, and they're dependent on a perceiver for them to even exist. They are caused by the primary properties in things, even by the motion of atoms and molecules. But he says there's a real world of real material objects out there that have the primary properties we say they have. And so, take the whiteboard over there. Its color would be subjective, but for Locke, there's a real whiteboard in a real world that has the rectangular shape it has, the size it has, its number, that is, that it's one whiteboard, that it's extended in space. And how do we get indirect knowledge of things? Sit down. I already gave out stuff. Pardon?
I got a final today, and I think it's going to kind of leave it, but come tell you.
Oh, I can't understand why they.
The schedule's probably. I don't know why they did all that.
I don't understand. There should not be cases where students have conflicting finals, and it's not even finals week yet.
I think I found this today.
Okay, I gave the term papers. I'm not going to go through anything else that I gave out last time, you know. So, I'll be in the office for a while. But at any rate, it's very discourteous of professors to give their finals when they conflict with class times of other people. Okay, so I'll be in the office for a while after noon. Yeah, I can't understand that, why professors think their classes are so important that they can take time that can conflict with other people's classes. Well, okay. So at any rate, so Locke thinks, I never see that directly, but my representative image of the whiteboard is of an object that's rectangular. In other words, because my image resembles, resembles that property, it accurately conveys knowledge of it to me, as well as information about the size and number of the whiteboard, the primary properties. The problem is, on a view like Locke's, it becomes nearly impossible for him, and Hume points this out, but so does Berkeley, to defend this confidence that he has that we live in a real external material world. Because for Locke, we can never get beyond our ideas, beyond our internal sensations, to compare them directly with an external world and confirm that they really do represent them. So the consequence is you don't know whether our internal experiences represent the world accurately to us, as Locke believed they did, or whether they represent anything at all, whether there is only or are only the ideas. Well, this led Berkeley to his own view. Locke's view seemed to lead to skepticism, and plus Berkeley is a very religious, very devout Christian who later became a bishop in the Church of Ireland, was concerned that a view like Locke's could lead not only to skepticism about the world, but to religious skepticism, but also to full-blown materialism. In other words, this view that, see, on a view like Locke's, when you and I were away from here this weekend, if nobody was in this room, the tables and chairs and the whiteboard and everything else was still in here. For Locke, material objects don't need anything for them to exist. Well, Berkeley is afraid that a view like this is going to lead some people, and he knows it has led some people, to full-blown materialism. In other words, give people the assumption that an external material world exists, independently of perceivers, and they may go to the conclusion that only matter exists, that everything that exists is material, and that's very damaging to traditional religious belief, right? If God is a spirit, and if our souls are supposed to be spirits, then what happens to God and our souls if only matter exists? So Berkeley, to try to defend not only what he thought was right philosophically, but his Christian views, tried to cut the stool out from under the legs of the materialists by advocating immaterialism, the view that only minds and the experiences of minds exist. That is, everything that exists is ultimately mental. And the way he gets to this is first by agreeing with Locke that the secondary properties of what we call objects out there in the world aren't really in things. Things like colors, feelings of heat and cold, taste, sounds. But they're in us as perceivers. They're caused by things out there in the world for Locke. But then, after agreeing with Locke on the secondary properties, Berkeley goes on to try to show that even the primary properties are subjective and mind dependent. And basically the bottom line of that is that a whole object is nothing but something that's subjective and mind dependent. And just like a pain can't exist without somebody there to feel the pain, to have the pain, without a perceiving mind, so, says Berkeley, cannot any other qualities of objects exist apart from a perceiving mind. And it turns out either our mind or God's. So these things that seem more substantial are ideas directly created in us by God for Berkeley, and other ideas like the ones in our imagination are created by us. But they're all mental. So Berkeley gives us a world that is entirely mental. Well, at any rate, I'm not going to go on there. Let me just hit a few of the highlights. But for utilitarianism, if you really want to review, it's probably better to go back and review the PowerPoints that I went through. But utilitarianism is part of a group of theories, egoism being one of them, ethical egoism, which are called consequentialist theories. That is, they're theories that try to claim that we can figure out what we ought to do morally, and we do that by looking at consequences. So, well, folks,